Tunde Onakoya is a Nigerian national chess master and coach who founded Chess in Slums Africa in 2017. He is driven by the conviction that chess can serve as a powerful educational tool to improve young lives and foster a new generation of intellectuals, even amongst underprivileged communities. His non-profit organization, Chess in Slums Africa, leverages the game of chess as a means of social intervention, bridging the gap between disadvantaged children and their aspirations by providing tuition-free education, learning resources, and mentorship opportunities. Chess in Slums Africa is creating an inclusive future for every African child. The initiative has garnered international attention with success stories of children from slums in Ikorodu, Makoko, and Oshodi Underbridge in Lagos, published by prominent media outlets such as BBC, Al Jazeera, Deutsche Welle, AFP, and MSN. To date, Chess in Slums Africa has impacted over 10,000 children's lives and secured fully funded educational scholarships for over 500 children to local and international institutions. As an eloquent speaker and advocate for harnessing potential from humble beginnings, Tunde Onakoya has shared his passion and vision on various platforms, including 3 TEDx talks. His efforts earned him numerous accolades, including the Future of Award Africa Prize for Community Action in 2021, the Business Insider Prize for Social Entrepreneur of the Year in 2022, the JCI 10 Outstanding Young Persons of Nigeria Award for contributions to children, world peace, and/or human rights in 2022, the Trend Dupe Award for Force of Social Goods in 2022, Leadership Newspaper Humanitarian of the Year, and the Royal Africa Award in 2022. Tunde.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to SUSU Podcast.
Thank you for having me on
Thank
today.
you for honoring my invitation and coming to join me today. I'm so excited to speak to you. I think we were excited to speak the first day we met.
Yes,
true. We were. And then our conversations are kind of gotten a bit more interesting as time has gone by. So this is my opportunity to share you with our views on SUSU Podcast. So traditionally on SUSU, and I don't like, not running the risk of being predictable, I always like to go back to the beginning, right? Where did Tunde come from? What is the history, the genesis of Tunde? And how did Tunde get to the point today where he's doing the phenomenal work that he's doing? And I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell the listeners what it is that you do. And, if they haven't already heard from your profile that I read out, I'm going to have you sort of tell us in your own words. But before we get there, let's go back a little bit further back to young Tunde, because I think the young you is very relevant to what it is that you do today.
True.
So can we go back? How far back would you like to go?
To the Beningen.
The
Beningen.
Beningen.
There was this video from Uganda, and the guy was just struggling. Wanted to say in the beginning, he just kept going in the Beningen.
I thought it was intentional, that video.
No.
I honestly thought it was intentional.
Said in the Beningen. Oh, in the Beningen. So in the Beningen, I think I could go as far back as when I was born. So I was born here in Lagos, in Ikorodu. So I mean, for a lot of Lagosians, they say Ikorodu is not part of Lagos. That's in Ogun State.
It's on the curb, isn't it? But it's a long road.
Yeah, yes,
very long
is.
road,
Yes,
and it cuts through, right?
Yeah. So I grew up there, and I think my earliest childhood memory was when I was. I think 1. So we had this thing outside. We had this pavement just in front of our house, and there was a main road just in front of on our street. So I would always run there. My mom would always, as far back as I could remember, she would always run and catch me and just bring me back inside. So I always wanted to go out there. I was a very adventurous kid. I was a very active kid. And we grew up in a difficult place. We grew up in a slum community, in a proper ghetto. And
on a scale of 1 to 10, how slummy was it?
10.
Wow.
They call the place Isaleodo, right? It's terrible, right? And I have a younger brother, so it's just two of us. Although my mom had like four other kids after my brother, but none of them stayed. So we later found out that they were both AS, and they just had like four SS kids. I'm AA, by the way, so most eligible bachelor. So, but yes,
Good to know.
we grew up in Ikorodu, and so yes, just like you rightly said, my own personal story and where I came from, like intersects with what I currently do, and I think that is what gives it meaning, right? To know that I had this kind of life, like I lived this kind of life. I understand the pain of what I currently do, right? So I think it's important to be able to feel like empathy in a deeply intimate way, to be able to do something like that with such heart and grace. So that was the genesis. I grew up in the slums.
And you do a lot of things with heart and grace. And I think this is why a lot of people are very moved by Chester Slum and particularly you, because we see your heart in your work. It's very evident. In fact, I think it literally just leaps off the page of wherever it is we're consuming your content, because you can genuinely see we can see the genuineness of what you're doing. We can see that it's coming from a place of real authenticity, right? It's not forced. Do you know, does that make sense to you? It's not conceited, it's not charity. It almost seems as if you're finding a way to give back to something. So there's a real intentionality behind what you do, and I think a lot of people see that and it resonates with them. So well done. And I think it's actually quite commendable, because you don't necessarily see a lot of young men like yourself, and I'm sure there are probably behind the scenes doing their bit, but not the way in which you're doing it. So it's very, very encouraging and very, very inspiring to watch. And you guys have not, Chester Slum has not been around very long, has it?
It's 5 years. 5 years now. And yeah, thank you for the kind words. It's true. There's the business of impact, right? And there's some people that just really do stuff, and you can see the integrity of what they do, like shine through the way they talk about it. It's like giving a part of myself expression. So this is just an expression of who I am, and of my story, leaving the best part of myself, with the world. And I think this is like the truest essence of our shared humanity, right? To take a lot of that pain and find how it intersects with another person's oppression. I think that is how we can like make meaningful change in the world, right? Because the moment you begin to understand that when you have some level of privilege, right, it's important that you become a conduit and be able to pay it forward, right? So it's just you're given something that you have that belongs to you. Like for me, it was my talent. I had this talent of chess, right? And it dates back to when I was in primary school.
Yeah, take us through that journey a little bit. When you discovered chess, it's quite an interesting story in itself.
Yes.
Give us an insight to what that moment looked like.
So I was 10 when I completed my primary school education, and so I was supposed to transition to secondary school, but then something happened. My dad's business was affected, so he had this downfall bus, and it had an accident. So that was our only, source of income, and that was it. So my parents just sat me down that day and told me that I would have to stop going to school, that they could only afford to like pay for my brother's tuition. I had to like do something to support the family.
How did you process that as a 10-year-old?
So, my parents are not educated, and they never got the opportunity to go to school, like beyond primary school, right? Because their own parents didn't understand the value of education, right? So my mom was always keen on me like getting an education, right? There was something she used to say that in Yoruba, mo fẹ́ pé kí tí wọ́n náà bá ti dàgbà Okuli Sorolari and Wegbe. So what it means is she wanted me to also be able to grow into an adult that could stand and speak in the midst of his peers. And that was a pain that she had, right? That she couldn't like get access to certain places, right? And I could see the hurt in her eyes because they had no choice. There was nothing they could do. We could only make enough, right, to feed, and even that, was a struggle, right? So what they wanted me to understand was, now they really want me to get an education, go to school properly and all of that. But then they can't afford it, right? And they wanted my brother that was just, I think, in primary one at the time, to at least be able to finish his primary school education. So I had to like stay so my brother could go to school. And
Is he older than or younger than you?
No, younger brother. So he was, I think I was 10. He was 6 at the time. So that was it. So that was a conversation. And I remember my mom cried because, she really, really wanted me to go to school and get an education, right? And I already went to one Paco primary school like that. So I couldn't even speak English. So we didn't even speak English at home. So it was just Yoruba and all of that. So I was supposed to start learning how to fix phones and refrigerators and all of that. So
at 10 years old?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was learning as an apprentice somewhere. So I would always go. So after like the day's job, I would just go to this barber shop to play video games. I think PlayStation 1 then. And on most days I didn't even have money to play. So I would just watch the other kids there, they would just come there to gamble, on their way back from school. So I would just watch them. And on one of those days, the barber just brought out a small plastic chess set. Now, prior to that time, I'd never seen a chess board before. So I was just fascinated by the way the pieces were carved. And I was like, what is this? And it was like, oh, this is chess. I was like, chess? No, he said, no, chess. So I asked him, what's this? The piece that looked like a donkey. And he said, no, it's not a donkey, it's a knight. And he just told me the names of the pieces. And I asked him to teach me how to play. And he was like, oh, no, you're too young. Right. But, it just really, sparked, that curiosity. I was a really curious child. And I wanted to know I wanted to understand the rules of the game. He would always say stuff like, oh, it was for smart people. And so I would always come back there every day. Then I think eventually his friends just started coming around and they would play, and sometimes I'll just see him sitting by himself, reading books and trying to analyze games. And I just started watching them. So with time, I was able to just pick up the rules of the game by watching. And that was how I discovered the gift of chess. By the time I didn't know that it was going to, set my life on a much different trajectory. All right. So eventually, I got back to school after 2 years at home. And this happened because one day my mom just woke up. I haven't shared this a lot of times. My mom just woke up and she just went to one private school not too far from where we grew up. And she told them that she would work there as a cleaner if our son could attend school there. And the woman thought she was crazy. And she was like, but she insisted and she didn't leave. And they were like, okay, bring your son the next day.
Wow.
So they brought me there and I was sitting in the office. They were asking me, what is a noun? And I didn't know. I was just looking. And the woman was worried that this boy has been out of school for too long. And she was like, okay, no problem. I could start with the, Jess's one. The next batch for the next session. So my mom was working as a cleaner. I remember her salary there was 30,000 naira, but she never collected it. It just went straight into like paying my tuition. And because she was a non-teaching staff, I only had to pay like 50%, tuition. I didn't have to pay the entire, school fees. And that was it. That was how I got back to school. And I remember my first term, I came first. So I was the top of my class, first term.
First term.
Yeah. And it was surprising for everyone because this was the boy that barely spoke in class. I had really low self-esteem because my classmates were like relatively like middle class kids that would like speak English at home, and their parents would come pick them up in the car, and I had to like walk, several miles to get home, and so I wouldn't talk, right? But I was intelligent, right? And chess also gave me the confidence to see that I could also be intellectually inclined, Unfortunately, our school had like an active chess club. So I joined, and, I already knew how to play, and my coach realized I was gifted, and that was it. So I had that confidence even as a kid that I could be different, right? What was like obtainable, in my community was like teenagers getting into drugs, cultism and all of that. But chess in some ways just shielded me from that life because we'd always go out for tournaments. And that was it. So that was how, I found the gift of chess. That was how I was able to go back to school. And at the end of my secondary school education, on the day I wrote my final paper for WAEC, my mom resigned.
From that school?
Yes. And that was it.
Wow.
And that school helped like shape me into like the man that I am now.
So let's talk a little bit about the mindset of that little 10-year-old that has now gotten back into school and discovered that he was in fact intelligent and was sort of now carving out his own voice amidst a room where English was not your first language. Mm-hmm. How do you think that particular incident impacted you at that particular age? And was there a shift in that little 10-year-old that you remember, if you look back at today?
Yes, I think the first event, that really, or like I say, it helped me see, the world beyond the confines of my environment, beyond the confines of my reality, right? I think it was when I won my first tournament. So I was 11 then. So I won a trophy. And I remember the day I came back home during the tournament. So we had this like Indian kids. I think it was a school for Indian expatriates in Nigeria. They also participated in tournaments. And I beat one of them, right, in the final round. And I remember even the coach was trying to come to tell him what to play, but then I still beat him, with all of that. Then when I got home with that trophy, I saw my dad cry for the first time. And my dad is a very hard guy, right? But no one had ever won something like that in our family. So he was really proud. And, he just went out and was telling all the neighbors that I see my son won a trophy. So I think for me, right, it changed everything for me. That moment, made me understand that, right, it didn't matter, where I came from. It didn't matter whether my parents were rich, or it didn't matter whether I was from Ikorodu or from Isalado. What mattered was what I had the ability to do, right? And that changed like the entire premise, right? The way people like regarded me, the way people, treated me was now different because I could play chess and I was damn good at it, right? So it just like reframed, that perception, right, of like myself. It gave me that sense of belonging, that I had a place in the world, right? It made me understand that, I had an identity, right? I wasn't just some kid from the slums, but I had an identity. I could do something and I was good at it. So it made me believe that if I could be really good at this, because I had put in so much effort into it and I could see that there was always going to be a reward for hard work, and I could become anything I wanted in the world, right? So now there's this, they say chess is a game for smart people, yeah, right? So for me, it held me to this intellectual standard that I wanted to be a smart person. And that was the way that I could like even the playing field, right? I understood that even as an 11-year-old boy, because, my mom would always tell me that, my fight is different. Like if other kids had to do 100 things, I had to learn to do 1,000 things, right? So I wanted to know more, and it made me even more curious, and it made me, ask more questions. It made me try to read more books, right? So that was what changed me, right? The confidence that I could be good at chess meant, and I could beat the rich kids, meant that I could become anything I wanted. And that stayed with me.
That's really powerful, because I can just imagine just the spirit of that 10-year-old just coming into shape and just coming to be. I can't imagine, because, many of us are privileged, like you said, and we have gone through education, and from a very, very young age, we were taught how to learn. And that's something that you can't really take for granted. So imagine being 10 years old and not knowing how to learn just yet, and then discovering that not only can I learn, I'm incredibly smart and capable. I'm just picturing you walking through your community with your chest pushed out and just feeling incredible within. On your IG page, you said it is possible. It is possible for great things to come up, to do great things in little places. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so this came from a place of deep conviction, and I wrote this on September 1st, 2018. And so it was a realization I came to when I visited the slum, the very first slum where we started our project there in Ikorodu. So it was in Ikorodu too. It was in a community called Majidun. So Majidun is like 5 minutes away from where I grew up in Isalodo. It was another slum, right? And what took me back then was because, after school and everything else, things were still really, really bad. But then I had gone pro, and I had started playing chess professionally, right? I was rated one of the best players in the country at the time. So I made a decision in 2018 to go back, right, and give other children like me the same opportunities I had through chess. And I wasn't sure what that was going to look like for them, right? But I just knew, just like it did for me, it was going to give them a different identity. It was going to give them a sense of belonging, right? In a world that is constantly evolving, that doesn't care about people in places like that. We needed to do something to help them also carve the place in the world. So chess for me was the only thing I had to give to them. I didn't have money. I didn't have anything else. And so when I went to that slum, and with a few chess boards on the first day, and I just put the boards down and I wanted to teach them. And I realized that they couldn't speak English, right? A lot of them were out of school. They were street kids. And so I couldn't communicate with them. So how do you teach a child who was never seen the four walls of the classroom that a rook moves vertically and horizontally? And I just got to that point. Like, how do I reach them? So I just started like using colloquials and just putting it together, gesticulations and just streets. And they got it. And in that very first class that we had, they were able to not just learn like the basic rules of the game. They were able to learn the board coordinates, able to learn how all the pieces moved. They were able to start understanding like opening strategy, the middle game. Just that one day. And I'd never seen anyone learn at that pace before. And I remember when I got home that day, because we were so excited. We took pictures of the kids while they were learning, while they were playing. And it dawned on me that the world was neglecting something in places like this, right? We were always so like fixated on the single story, the single stereotype that, children in places like this are good for nothing, they are dullards, or, the single story. But we forget that they're just victims of a tragedy that they know nothing about, which is that tragedy of poverty, of their parents' poverty. So they were born into that cycle, right? They don't get an education because of it. So they never get to know what they can truly become. But then, in this very small place, right, that the world doesn't pay attention to, like, great things could emerge. Just like my interaction with them on that day and seeing that, what we were neglecting was the incredible potential that they had, right? Which is the story of becoming, right? So I wanted to put it into words as I continued to just view those pictures. And I just wrote it out that it is indeed possible to do great things from a small place, right? And this is going to be my commitment to showing the world that, greatness can be found even in the most unlikely places. And I wrote, this is day one, right? And that was it. All right. And I continue to tell people this every time, right? Because that was the conviction that I had, right? Before even going on this path, right? And, completely giving myself, right, to this vision that we can indeed like find great things in a small place. So that was it.
You've discovered quite a lot of talent in those small places. Tell us about some of the children that you've had the pleasure of teaching that have literally just profoundly demonstrated that very thing, that this little individual is a gemstone, right? in this incredibly rough place. Just tell us a little bit about those individuals. And I know that you have some champions in there. You've developed some champions. You've definitely just developed some champions amongst those. Just tell us a little bit about some of the children that stand out to you the most in that in the last 5 years.
Okay, this is always my favorite story to tell. I mean, it's been 5 years. It feels like such a long time ago, but it's been just 5 years. But in those 5 years, we've have interacted with over 10,000 children, right? Have had the privilege of telling a new story, right? I believe every child is an untold story, and it is a responsibility, right, to tell a beautiful one for them, right? They're like messages that we're sending to a time we're not seeing. And one of those messages, right, was when I met this kid, Ferdinand. So we started in Ikorodu. Then after 2 years, we decided to move to Makoko. Makoko is the largest floating slum in the world. So it was, okay, we had done something phenomenal in Ikorodu and wanted to see or test the ability of this model to scale, right? Can we scale this up to other communities, right? Can we begin to reach more children even in other places? And Makoko was just a perfect challenge for that because, when you talk about poverty in its purest form, it's in places like that where people live on black water. Like water, it feels almost like they're living on sewage. It's just horrible, right? So wanted to go there and wanted to tell a new story of the children there, right? Remember, we didn't just want to focus on the single story of poverty. And we met Ferdinand there, right? Ferdinand was one of the 100 kids that we selected. In fact, he didn't come on the first day, so it wasn't part of like the initial 100 kids that were chosen for the program, right? So the next day, I just saw this boy, walking, towards the center, and the other kids started laughing at him, and they were telling him to go back, Joe. So they were calling him this word, Golugo. So Golugo means imbecile in their local, dialect, and he was crying. So I called him and I told him to come in, and I asked what his name was, and he couldn't speak. So I realized that, like it was I wouldn't even say disabled, it was a differently abled child, right? He had this medical condition called cerebral palsy, and he couldn't speak, and the way he walked, and so the other kids in the community would bully him because of that, right? Because they didn't even understand, his condition. He was 10, but I had never been to school before because, nobody even knew that he had capacity to learn. And his parents, his father was a fisherman and his mother was a petty trader, and they were living in extreme poverty, and they had like 6 other kids, right? So he was just neglected. And I just looked at him and he had this sparkle in his eyes, right? And I just picked him. I just told him to join one of the classes, and he sat there and he started learning. The next day, I remember I was trying to do something, and the instructor for that class just came up to me and he was crying, and I said, "What happened?" He said, "Come and see something today." And
the instructor was crying.
Yeah, the instructor was crying. I was like, "What's wrong, Sam?" Like, come see something. And he just took me to the boys' table and was like, "See." And I just watched for a few seconds, and it just dawned on me that this boy was solving, a very complex, I don't want to use a technical term, but was solving a very complex puzzle, right? Something that would like take like months, like for anyone to master. Like he already understood those coordinates, and just after just one day of learning, I realized that it was a genius. Like it was a gifted child. It was a child whose first language was chess, because he had a sound mind, but then he hadn't found a way to express it. So he found a way to express that innate ability that he had through chess. And I couldn't just believe it. I was like, wow. I just took him to, the senior class and told him to start learning there instead, because it was obviously too advanced for that class. And that was it. So he started getting really good. And after a few months of training, we decided to host a tournament for the kids. And I remember when we did the tournament in Makoko, we made suits, 3-piece foot suits for all the children because, like I said, we're very, careful about like changing society's perception about the slums, like to let people know that the slum is just a place. It doesn't define the people that live there, right? So we didn't want to demean the children or show them at their worst because they're in Makoko. So we made suits for them that, hey, they're playing this prestigious game of royalty. They must look the part. And, Ferdinand wore his suit on that day. I remember I was the one that dressed him up. And you can guess who won that tournament. He did. And
wow. Amongst how many contestants?
50 kids.
50 kids?
Yes.
Were they all from the slum communities?
All of them were from the slum there. So we had the tournament there in their community. And he beat every one of them. And
wow.
And that was it. It was a miracle. And I remember posting the story on Twitter, and it went super viral. And I got mails for days from people all over the world with, differently abled kids too. And Ferdinand's story inspired so many people, and they wanted their kids to learn chess too because of him. And it became a celebrity in his community there. So the word that they used to call Galuga.
A little bit like Little Tunde when he came in with the trophy.
Yes.
It's quite symbolic because I'm seeing the threads between both your stories, right? Obviously, you are fully able-bodied. You didn't have Ferdinand's condition.
Yes.
But same type of write-off, a kid that's been written off by the community, 10 years old is quite a significant number as well in both stories. And then the outcomes.
Now that I think of it.
Yes. I'm seeing the common thread between your stories there.
Yeah.
It's really, really inspirational. So when people are reaching out to you, when they hear about stories such as Ferdinand, what is a common question or common statements that you hear mostly from people in terms of their feedback when they hear the stories from you?
Sometimes I feel like I'm the one person in the world with the most messages from people because, oh God, I've read thousands of messages from people from at least like 50 countries from around the world because of the work that we do. And I think one thing, that always stands out is people like inquiring about how, okay, there's this group of people that tell me that, hey, I love what you do and this is what I've always wanted to do all my life, but because I didn't get to do this while I was young, I am now committed to like living vicariously through you. I get messages like that. I remember getting a mail like that from an 82-year-old man, living in the US. Yes. Wow. So the mail, at the end of the mail, was sent from my daughter's iPhone. And, he said, he had lived all his life in the US. He served in the Navy and he had been following the project for about a year. And, like a lot of the stories, like really just stayed with him. And he knew every single story of the children that I had shared. And they wanted me to know that I was living vicariously through me and that I should never stop. Right. So I think, the common denominator here is everyone, will want to do something that gives our humanity expression, but we don't know how to do it, or we don't know how to go about it, or we think that it has to be this grand gesture of like, oh, when I become a billionaire, when I become a millionaire, I can now think about giving back, or I can now think about doing something. But we forget that, we can do great things from a small place with the very, little act of kindness within our own sphere of influence. We can start something. It reminds me of the story of this little kid that was walking, on the beachfront, and there were a lot of, I think, is it starfishes now that, that were washed, on to land, and it was draining them back into the ocean. And there were like thousands of them, right? So there was no way in the world they'd be able to throw all of them back in. So one man saw him doing it and he was like, why are you doing this? This is futile, right? And it was like, why? Like, because you can't throw them all back into the ocean. Like, it doesn't matter how much you throw back in, you'll never be able to throw all of them back in. And he just looked at the man and he picked another starfish and threw it back in. Said it doesn't matter, right? But it matters to this one starfish. And he kept throwing and he just kept doing his own thing. And it matters to that one child, right? It matters to that one person that we can directly, impact in our own little way. You don't have to wait till you become a millionaire. So when people ask and they want to know how I'm able to do it, I just tell them, see, just at the intersection of like your privilege and another person's oppression, that is where we find, opportunities to make meaningful change. And that is an important starting point, right? Because it makes sure that you're deeply connected to that cause. It's not just something you're doing mindlessly or as an afterthought or for the optics, right? So yeah.
So there's a lot of people out there who feel that they have a responsibility to give back, but
Yes.
struggle to understand where they can start. In the future of Chester Slum
Mm-hmm.
and where you want to drive this movement and initiative that you guys are bringing to these children, what's your greatest fear?
Or okay, this is one question I've never heard before, so I don't have a ready-made answer. The greatest fear in this future. All right, so maybe a fear I had, a couple of years ago was because with time I began to understand that, my life was different. I began to understand that I saw the world differently and I couldn't afford to be like everyone else, right? So what that meant was, I God, I believe in God and he gave me this gift, right? This gift of empathy, this gift to be able to feel, because I can't do anything if I don't feel these things intimately, right? And I have the responsibility to be able to tell the stories of these children in the most compelling way. So what that means is if I not the best version of myself, I will not be able to tell the stories of these children in the way that it needs to be told, right? And if people cannot find that connection to the stories of these children, they won't get the help that they deserve, right? So I remember the first radio interview I had and they asked me to talk about the project and I was just stuttering and I couldn't articulate my thoughts properly and it was just a mess. And I went back home and cried not because I messed up, but the consequence wasn't just shame for me. It was that maybe a child could have gotten a life-changing opportunity, by me, being able to articulate my thoughts properly and share that story with someone that I could resonate with, right? So I feel like I carry that burden for 1 million children. That is my vision, to give the gift of chess to 1 million children across Africa, right? We've reached maybe 10,000 now, right? So the responsibility to always be at my best, right? To live up to my truest potential. I think it's just that fear always lingers at the back of my mind that what if I'm unable to function at this capacity? What if, if you want to change the world, you need to figure out how to pay for it. What if I'm unable to, develop myself into that person that can, bring in the kind of funding to be able to do this at scale? So the millions of children that we want to reach, whose lives could be tied to the success of the Chess and Slums project, right? What if I'm unable to do those things? Then, what happens to all those children that I really, really, really care for, right? What if something happens to me? I'm unable to live out this potential. So I think for me, it's that fear that if I don't become, the truest version of myself, the thousands of children who will never get to become too. I don't know, it's a weird responsibility, a weird burden to carry, but I think of it that way and I take it very seriously.
Does it keep you up at night?
Yes, it does. It keeps me going, even when I want to be selfish and, look for cheap thrills that, but yeah, it keeps me up every day.
How do you balance your ability to have empathy with the mechanics of running the organization? Because as an entrepreneur, I know that on this journey, there's a lot of very difficult decisions to be made, right? And a lot of the times our passion and the things that we want to do and our intentionality, sometimes it can feel like it's interrupted and it's inconvenienced by responsibility and expectations, right? And the mechanics of running a business. How do you sort of balance those two aspects?
It's really hard, and I think every leader has to deal with this at some point in their life, right? You want to be the nice guy, but at the same time, you have to make the hard decisions, and it is a lot more pronounced when you're doing, like, you're running a non-profit, right? Because especially in this climate, like Nigeria, there are 100 million people living in multidimensional poverty. And because of, like, the vulnerability in the places that we work in, you get to experience poverty in its worst form. Like, when they say people are poor, like, to some people it's just some random survey, right? They just read, or UNICEF did the survey that, and they're in their own bubble that's shielded, right, from the realities of, like, common man, right? But the ones that bear the most brunt of it are the children in these places I work with every day. And when we started the Chess and Slums project, I tried really hard to stay disconnected from, Tunde, you know what? You're just going to go to the slums and teach these children chess and leave. If they come to you with their problems, you can't help them, because even you are broke yourself. But you know what changed that for me, and how it has helped me find some balance, like, through the years, was, I remember there was this thing it was 2019 December, right? So it was Christmas period, and the kids would come with promise card, right? Now, normally they would always tell me their struggle, uncle, we've not eaten, and this thing, we can't go to school. I'm like, even uncle is struggling. You can see, look at my shoe. Look at my fat thigh and my worn out trousers. So uncle is trying, but I'll keep teaching you guys chess. You don't have to pay for it, but I can do more than that. But on that day, right, so they brought promise cards. Uncle, promise me 10 naira, promise 20 naira. I give it to them, right? So I didn't realize I'd given all the money that I had on that day. So I was going back home, and I just entered, downfall, and I wanted to pay. So when I was walking back to the bus stop, I would always feel my pocket to know if I still had money. So I just felt something. So I thought, okay. So when I got to inside the bus and I wanted to pay the downfall guy, I just put my hands in my pocket, and what I just saw was, like, paper. So the kids, apparently they were writing letters about the things that they needed. Oh, uncle, please, I want, like, a school bag. Oh, uncle, this. And they were putting it in my pocket, and I didn't know. So I didn't have any money. And the conductor was already swearing for one woman that didn't even have change. Not to talk of not even having money to pay him. I just looked at the fine girl beside me and I said, please, can you pay for two? It was so embarrassing.
Wow.
And she just said yes. So when I got home, I read all those letters. I still have those letters in my bag since 2018, 19. I read them, and these were letters from the children, and I couldn't help them, right? Because Uncle Tunde was broke. So what I did was, and this was when I really started using social media, I just took pictures of all the letters and I posted it on my Facebook. I said, letters from children. And I just wrote something poetic about how, like, these are the things that they need. And these are not like selfish things. They're like basic things that they need to become better versions of themselves, or they want a school bag. And people saw that, and, they felt it too. And people met those needs for them. Right. So, and that was it. And that was how I knew that I don't have to be the hero in the story, because I can't save everyone. Right. So what I could do, I can douse it a bit by sharing this body with other people. So learning to be able to outsource responsibility to people, right, to the team, has helped take a lot of that weight off me to want to be the hero, to want to help everyone, or to be too emotionally involved in, like, wanting to help everyone. Because at the end of the day, I will never have the capacity for that, no matter how rich I am, even. Right. So that has helped, right, in some way, right? And in some ways too, I've made some foolish decisions just following my heart. I have adopted 6 kids from this program, and that
So
often
let's go back.
6.
You have adopted 6 children
Yes.
that you're parenting currently
Yes.
from
6.
the slums.
Yes.
How on earth did that come about? And you're telling me right now you're a father to 6.
I've been a father of 6 for like 3 years now.
Wow.
Yes. And I mean, they're all very long stories, but I'll just summarize like what the situation is right now. So like these are kids that 2 of them lost their parents while we were like while I was their coach, while we were in their community teaching them, and they were going to take them back to the village, right, to start learning how to farm. And because I was their chess coach, I had seen the incredible potential that they had. So the family was like, they don't have family in Lagos. Their mom has died. Their dad has abandoned them, yeah, even before they were born. So what happens? Are you going to take the responsibility? Because I was blatantly saying, no, you can't take these kids back to the village. So what will you do then? Will you take them in? And I didn't even have a place that I was living. I was living with my aunt. This was in 2020. And
The height of COVID?
yes, this was in 2020, August. And I said, yes, I'll take them in. 2 of them. Then another two, they lost, they only had their mom. And their mom died from malaria. And I remember when they called me that she was sick, I took her to the hospital, and I think she knew she wasn't going to make it. And she just told me that, listen, if anything happens to my children, please take care of them. And she died
How
a
old
few
were they?
weeks. First one then was 13, and the younger one was 11. So that was Ayo and Jamyu. And that was it. I had to stay true to what she wanted me to do for her. And I mean, the only alternative again was they were going to end up on the streets, and I had to take them in. And the final 2 was from our recent project in Oshodi on that bridge in 2021. And, the boy that won the tournament, and another kid that could read really well and was very intelligent and wanted to become a web developer. And I just couldn't let him go back home. One was an orphan. The other one, his parents live in one village in Ekiti where there are farmers, and this boy is intelligent. So how do I just let him go knowing fully well that this boy has the capacity to become more? That boy is a graphics and web developer now, right? So I have 3 apartments, one in Kurudu, one in Yaba, and one in Magodo, where 2 of them live in Yaba. 2 of them live with my parents. So my parents even had to step in to take some of
So your parents
Yes.
are technically grandparents now
Yes, they
to
are.
2.
Yes.
And the other 2, where are they?
And 3 of them, 3 of them live with my parents. 2 of them live in Yaba. So I alternate there. And so we have like a team of, some of the Chesum team that live there in Yaba too. And one of them, stays with me. So although sometimes he goes to school, boarding school.
So all these kids, you've put them all in school,
Of
and
course.
they're all playing chess.
One of them is
currently?
in university, and it will be going to Washington next year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
And they're all expert players. One of them has represented Nigeria twice. And yes, they're doing well.
That is incredible, Tunde. So what it's like being a dad?
First thing is, dating has been hard because first thing you tell your friend on first date is, I have 6 kids. She's like, sorry, what? I have 6 kids. No.
Wow.
But it's been exciting, right? Because, my dad was a good man, right? He taught us a lot of things. And even while we didn't have anything, my dad was a very, goofy person, happy, good. He was a happy man. And, although, he could be really tough and difficult sometimes, but he taught us how to love. He taught us how to be very empathetic, right? He cared for people, right? he had his downfall boss. So a lot of area boys, conductors used to like work with him. I saw how he would care for them, right? So I think at first it was hard because I was struggling, and all of them were living with me at some point when I was still back in Ikorodu, and I knew that I now had like this important role in their lives to give them guidance, right? And that's the responsibility of the father, to give guidance, right? To show them that, see, you have all these desires right now. You want to do all these things. You want to do them now, but you have time, and you must understand time and seasons. You're young now, right? So you have time to do a lot of things that even I myself cannot do anymore, right? I remember when two of them started school for the first time, I wrote a letter to their teacher, right, to really express how I felt and how I wanted that teacher to teach them. I remember the letter I wrote, dear, let me see, something, something. Today is Odo and Ayomide's first day at school, right? Please teach them to have faith in their own ideas, right? Teach them that it's okay to fail, right? Teach them, the wonder of books, right? That they could travel the world through books. Teach them that it is possible to do great things from a small place. Teach them to never be afraid of failure. I wrote all of that and I sent it to the teacher, and the teacher framed it and put it in the classroom for them. So I tried to be as thoughtful as possible, and even despite like all the complexity that comes with the work that I do, and to still make out time, right, for them, right? So, it's hard, but it's been deeply fulfilling, and fatherhood is something I've always looked forward to. So I've had some practice. I've had a lot of practice.
You've had more practice than most,
Yes.
right? So you are well, you're a bona fide father already. I don't think there's really anything much other than that at this point. But are you looking forward to expanding on your 6?
No, never.
Really?
No.
You're not going to have any more kids?
Okay, my own kids.
Your own, yes.
Yeah, of course. I want to have a lot of kids, of my own kids, but I want to stop taking children off the streets. I think because it's hard, it's really hard, and
it's a lot of responsibility.
Yes, and it boils down to like being too attached, emotionally. Maybe I could have made hard decisions, but I'm glad I didn't. Then I didn't do what was logical, right? I just followed my heart because, you can imagine how I feel when I see the children like make progress in their lives. Like when Jami got into university, and, when Ayomide, met Tunde Elumelu, when he redesigned Chelsea Slum's website. I'm glad that I took a chance in them, right? But yeah, I look forward to having my own kids and building my own family. So
Fantastic. So what's the future for Chester Slum? Where do you see you guys going? I know you have your goal, 1 million children over how many years?
10 years.
10 years. That's huge, right?
It is.
That's a huge goal. But have you started thinking about some of the other achievements that you want, Chester Slum to sort of achieve between now and those 10 years, so we can sort of expect where we're going to see you guys taking this great initiative?
Yeah, 10 years. Interestingly, we just got back from Kenya and Uganda, and like we're expanding to other African countries now. And this is a revolutionary idea, and I call it a revolution because I think it's something that has always been there, that has this deeply historic value, and we are giving it new meaning. Right? Chess has always been there, through times, centuries, but we are like revealing a new essence to it, to what it can do, and how it could also be a disruptive tool, for children living in impoverished, communities, to help them begin to, build those critical thinking abilities, those cognitive abilities, right? Because, there's all this talk, whenever people talk about Africa, it's potential. Right? It's always potential, this, but potential is nothing if it's not realized, right? So how do we move from Africa having this incredible potential to actually like bringing all of that, to fruition, right? We have to go back to like the fundamentals, which is the children, right? Look at Nigeria is at what now? 200 million now. The next 50 years, right now we have, I think, the highest population of young people in the world. In the next 50 years, this is going to triple, right? So that future that we continue to talk about, if we don't prepare the young ones for that future, they will become a liability to that future, right? They would become a liability to that future. And we have all this human capital, all this potential. So I think Chess and Slums is leading this revolution, right? To raise 1 million children who will become critical thinkers, right? To
See,
give them
that word for me is, when I think about Chester Slum, that's the word that just keeps playing on my mind constantly. Now, obviously, you know what I do,
Yes.
and as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, trying to push entrepreneurship and skills within my industry in Nigeria, critical thinking is always that deficit that we're always trying to fill. The gap between those who can do something incredibly well
Yes.
and those who are basically just scavenging through, managing, right? It's the ability to have critical thinking. And it's something that we struggle with, because the essence of starting off with the children is so that you don't now have adults who now are struggling
Yes.
with critical thinking application in their day-to-day. Because that's what sets the experts apart from those who are mediocre,
Average, yeah.
very average, very mediocre. So starting with the children, talk us through how the art of playing chess is filling in that gap and building that root in the children now, and how you see that evolving into their adult life.
All right, great question. So children are very impressionable, right? There's this quote about how it's easier to like build, children than repair broken men, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, you have this clean slate, and whatever you write in that slate, right, stays with them. It informs a lot of like who they get to become, right? That is how children learn. Children learn very differently. They see the world through very curious eyes. That's why they ask the most ridiculous questions and they bother you with the most ridiculous things. But have learned more from teaching children than I've actually even given, like, thought to them, right? I've learned more from the way they see the world, the way they feel empathy. Right? If they don't like you, they'll tell you. If they love you, they'll let you know, right? So the way I like to look at like our work and how like this feeds into building strong children and how this would eventually feed into building Africa's prosperity is chess is the vehicle. It's not the end in itself. Not all of them will become masters or professionals like me, right? But it will be a means to several ends, education being one of them, right? But more importantly, to begin to teach them how to think, right? Not what to think, but how to think.
Mm-hmm.
A new frame, like to think about problems. These are the children that will, when they gain the skill, this ability, right, they will challenge the status quo and they will turn Africa's, biggest problems into global opportunities. I don't need to tell you that I'm a critical thinker now. You just know, like, from the way I think about the work that I do, like the way I approach problems, right? Because I've had to face so much complexity over the past few years, right? But because chess has trained me to have this deeply analytical mind, right, I'm able to just strip it down, right, to what matters, understand the concept of delayed gratification. And this is like scientific too, right? Chess grows dendrites on both sides of the brain. It's like there was this research in Russia where they taught one class for 6 months and they taught the other class and they didn't teach the other class, and after 6 months they just graded them, and the class that had the chess program did better in the academics, right? So it helps begin to build these cognitive abilities in a way that even conventional education may not be able to reach. That is why countries like Russia, China, Armenia, chess is a national legacy. Like they teach it as a subject for them, right? And there are a lot of parallels from chess to mathematics, even to AI. When Google built DeepMind, when Google acquired DeepMind, the first project that it did was building a chess engine AlphaZero, right? And that was like a groundbreaking innovation for mankind, like in the field of AI and what, computers can do, right? And now look at AI now. So chess has all this incredible benefits. Now imagine teaching it to a child in the slums, right? That doesn't even know that their minds can be their greatest asset. A child, who's suffering or life has conditioned him to think about life as survival, as what to eat
As
today,
day to day,
day to
yes.
day, right? There's no room for imagination. So introducing chess to them can be very disruptive, right? It gets them to first sit down, right? You think through a game for like several hours, and the process of learning over time stays with you, right? It becomes a part of like your framework for thinking about things. And that is critical thinking, right? And that is going to be the most important skill for the future of work. As education and everything gets disrupted, that one thing would always stay: your ability to think critically, right? And this is what we want for every African child too. Like I said, chess is not the end in itself. It's a means to that end, to prepare them for that future, to raise a new generation of intellectuals, right? That won't just complain about our problems, but that will think critically about it, understand it, right? Challenge the status quo, right? And bring Africa to the prosperity that it deserves.
I know that your focus really is the children, right? And it's evident that's the root of a lot of our evolution and our development as in Africa, to solve a lot of our problems. But the millions of adults who have now grown up and have missed that boat, knowing what you know now and the experience that you've had through the children, what would you say the adults themselves need to do now to contribute to their own development and growth? Because we like to say it's never too late, right? It's never too late to learn. What can the adults of today in Africa begin to do to bridge a little bit of the gaps that we are seeing is wide open, in terms of us making effort not to just give up on them?
Yes.
What can we begin to do as adults now? From Tunde, what would you say to those people?
That's a very thoughtful question. Okay. So maybe the first then, right, for us right now, right, and where we are right now, we're in a very bad place, right? And there was this thing I read somewhere that like if there was an option to bomb Africa or bomb New York, and they were just weighing it in terms of like cost benefit analyses, and they'll bomb Africa because the GDP of like 3 states in the US is like bigger than the entire continent of Africa. And if they were like being objective, and that just challenged me. I was like, for real? I said, yes, that's it. Like, that's a reality. And you can imagine for a continent that is so blessed, but we're compromised in our leadership, and that is why we have gotten to this point. So now, what can we do going forward? I believe personally that one of the greatest inventions, right, of mankind is the internet. And the internet has equalized the playing field in some way, in terms of like access to information, right? We have access now. There's still a lot of things that is systemic that, we still wouldn't get, right? But one thing I know is when you're good at what you do, like when you're good at what you do, you're one of the best in the world at what you do, it becomes undeniable. Like no one can tell you any different. Like you're good, you know your stuff, you're the best at what you do, you strive for that. You're going to be excellent about these things. You're not going to cut corners. You're going to stand out in this field. You're not going to do what everyone else is doing. You're not going to become sheep. That you're going to take care, like within your own immediate sphere of influence. Like you're going to do it to the best of your ability. You're going to use the tools and resources made available to you to really, really stand out, right? Like that ability, that skill is undeniable, and the world will look for it. And this is how the world works, right? With all of this, systemic, when you're the best, it becomes undeniable. You get the opportunities that you deserve, right? And that is, that's where we are at right now. Africa has so much potential. We have all this incredible potential. It's just being able to aggregate a lot of these things and build something meaningful, right? It's been hard because we're selfish, right? A lot of us are selfish. Our idea of success doesn't go beyond our own personal,
individualistic.
Yes, exactly. It's, I want to get my PhD, I want to get my master's degree, I want to build a house, I want to buy my Lamborghini, right? And that is almost the cost of the black man, right? We talk about Ubuntu and how it's I am because you are, but we don't live it every day. And that is why I think the work that I do, that you do, is important, right? Because you're building something that grows a community. No one is going to come and save us. So it is entirely up to us to nurture a community, because leaders would emerge from that community, right? So right now, we should be more concerned about progress, about success as a whole, as a community, right? To, people that are trying to divide us, right? The strategy is always divide and conquer. That is how Africa is in this mess. Using the people that are selfish and using them to, break us apart as a people, using them to sow seeds of confusion. So if we can really come together, right, for causes that we care about and see it through to the very end, right? I'm already climbing my own mountain, right? It's an education for children, going back to beauty fundamentals. And I'm not going to do it alone. I'm going to look for like-minded people. People that, while they might not be the ones to roll up their sleeves to do the work, they would give their full support to the people that are passionate about rolling up their sleeves, right? So I think we just need to really come together as a community, right? And begin to redefine what success should mean, begin to build things that don't just benefit ourselves or serve our own personal interests,
but the collective.
Exactly. So I think if there can be a shift in mindset from this very selfish one to one that benefits us as a collective, then we can start a conversation about actually solving problems and not just cutting corners, right?
Does chess teach selflessness?
Yes, it does, of course.
Yeah.
It teaches selflessness. It teaches delayed gratification, and for me, the power of focused thought. And it's let me give a quick chess analogy. Sorry to the people that don't play chess. So there's the pawns,
Mm-hmm.
there's the rook, there's the knight, there's the bishop, there's the king, there's the queen, right? So they all have the different values. The pawn is the least valuable with just 1 point. The rook has a value of 5
Would the
points.
pawn be the representation of this selfish African who only thinks about self and immediate gratification? I'm asking because I don't play chess. I have no idea, but I'm just trying to understand.
The pawns are the ones that are disposable. The ones that are like the servants. The ones that don't really, Okay, good. Okay, good analogy would be the pawn, the single pawn, the isolated pawn, is the selfish one. It's the one that wants to match in, because the pawn has this ability, right? It's the least valuable piece, right? But when it matches to the final rank, it undergoes what we call pawn promotion, and it becomes a queen, the most powerful piece. So that pawn, if it can brave all odds and everything and get to the final rank, it becomes a queen. So in chess, the small one can become the big one, right? So it has potential. It's the story of Africa. Potential in silos. But then, it's not possible for a single pawn from the beginning of the game to just start moving. When the pawn does that, it gets captured. So you just pick one pawn, and you pick it, and you play it again, and you neglect all the other pieces. You get captured. You will never be able to make it to that rank. But when the pawns are moving together in that bond, they're unstoppable. And 1 pawn is 1 point, but 5 pawns together has a collective value of 5 points. And they're very strong. And they could even be stronger than the queen that has a value of 9 points. Realistically, in an end game of 5 pawns together, Against the queen, there's like 9 points. The queen cannot stop them. One pawn would eventually queen. And when that happens, you win the game, right? So I think a lot of this like feeds into like what, like how like chess can also represent like an important philosophy for like thinking about, the African situation, right? Because the pawns, they're stronger when they're together. But the moment you choose to isolate it and start moving it, it just gets killed, right? It won't do anything, it won't achieve anything. The rooks are like the generals, 5 points. The knights, 3 points each. The bishops, 3 points. The king is invaluable. If you lose the king, you lose the game, and that's it. While the queen is the most powerful piece with 9 points, she has so much power and influence on the board. But if you lose her, the game still continues. But then, if you lose your queen, your chances of losing is like 9 over 10 already, if you lose it carelessly. So now, there's like this hierarchy, right? And there's these different dynamics. So the true master is the one that knows how to combine the strengths and weaknesses of all of them together, right? So understand that the pawn being the weakest piece doesn't mean it's useless. It just means that it needs to be supported by maybe a rook or maybe another pawn, and it becomes powerful. And the value, transcends, that in its the value, initial value that has been ascribed to it, right? So I think a lot of this, lessons. Peter Thiel, the billionaire, he teaches a chess course at Stanford using chess analogies, to teach business strategy. So there's a lot of these things that can be learned, using chess as as an analogy, right? So these are the things that we teach the children. And they're learning these things at a really, really young age, right? And they're learning to also be social, because chess is a game that breaks those barriers, not social disparities, gender stereotypes. Anyone can play chess. A child can play against a billionaire. They can sit at the same table. It is a great equalizer, right? And I tell them so they understand the power that this has. At the moment you sit at the same table with anyone in the world, no matter who they are, you're not equal. What now matters right there is the skill level that you have, right? And that is how it should be, right? We're building an equitable future for the children, for the African child, right? A future that includes all of them, right? And there's no future worth dreaming of whatsoever if it doesn't include all of them too, right? So teaching them these things through chess is something we're very conscious of. So they begin to know that it's not even about the skill that they're learning, but how it also relates, to other parts of their life.
So you're teaching them application.
Of course, yeah.
So in a situation where a child is learning the weakness and the power of the pawn, are you are you guys articulating that to make them understand how that plays relevance in their day-to-day life?
Yes.
And how they can relate to their their peer groups, to understand about the power of unity? Because again, this is something that we struggle with here, right? Everybody has been taught in a large part to think very individualistically. It's survival of the fittest.
Yes.
But the fittest doesn't have to be a singular person. It doesn't have to be isolated.
It doesn't.
Right? So are the children at this stage able to understand that? And do you see that manifesting in the way in which they sort of, how they kind of interact with one another day to day?
Yes. Children are better than us, right? They're much better people, humans, than we adults would ever be. That is why it's important that we preserve a lot of that innocence, right? Because they'll lose it, right? Someday. They'll begin to shed that innocence and begin to understand how the world really works. But what if they never actually get to lose it? Because a lot of like the way the child sees the world, right? A lot of like people that have done pretty phenomenal things, you would see a lot of childlike characteristic in them. Not childish, childlike.
There's a curiosity that never died.
Never died. Yes, exactly. Right. It just stayed with them and they never lost it. For us, maybe something, one trauma, especially in Nigeria,
It turns
we
you into a
just beat it
pessimist
out of you
real quick.
Become very cynical.
Everything is, it's not possible. It cannot be done. Right? Very, very
But
quickly.
the child does not understand that. He will ask you why. Why? There was one task I gave the kids, and this is like things I like to do. So I told them that to draw a car, like that would take them to school,
Mm-hmm.
and they drew it. So I told them to just draw anything that can take them to school. Just anything, like anything you think can take you from your house and convey you to school. And come and see innovation. They drew a bird with tires. They just drew all kinds of things. I said, what is this? How will he get you? They say, what can it? Oh, he can fly. Then when he needs to park, he can now come down and the tires now. Okay, this I can.
Wow.
You can just see, how the imagination just thrived, right? And the world is nothing without imagination. Like humanity has gotten its best leverage from people with childlike imagination. People that just woke up one day and said, do you know that, we can have something that flies and take people from one country to the... And of course, the cynics will come and be like, I beg, we've not seen it before, it's not possible. But humanity has gotten its greatest leverage from people like that, right? So children, are really, really, really special, right? And all children, the ones in the slums, the ones that are privileged, all children. But the children of the slums have a different fight, right? And it is one that, that is really hard. But we must make sure they never get to fight it alone. Like creating equitable opportunities for them too, right? So all of these things, like you rightly said, it's going to, like, a lot of this potential that we're helping them leave out, right? Just like the pawn can become a queen. Right now, they're still like pawns. But if we can push them, right, collectively to the final rank, they come into their true story of becoming. So that is the story of the African child. It's not the story of like the present circumstance, but it's the story of becoming. And they will become, right, if you give them the right opportunities. Talent is universal. Opportunity isn't. That's the only difference between us right now and the developed countries. They understand how to wield that potential, right? They understand the kind of education that they should be giving their children. Chess is a curriculum subject in Armenia. Armenia boasts of some of the cleverest people in the world. In China and in parts of New York. So, yeah.
So we know that social impact in Nigeria is an uphill battle. It's not the easiest environment to attract funding. It's not the easiest environment to get buy-in because of all the complicated issues that we go through day to day, socially, politically, and all of that. How do you feel that need? And if anybody's listening and watching this episode, how would you like them to help you guys in achieving the goal, and making sure that you can continue to do great work?
All right. So, yes, I mean, challenges are clear. And money is always a problem, right? For everyone to be able to do anything meaningful, you need money. To change the world, whatever it is, to ruin the world, you need money, right? So it's hard. And I think Nigeria, Africa needs more more leaders that are like impact conscious, right? Now there's a lot of like money, like coming into Africa, into the tech ecosystem right now. So the way this works is people follow the money, right? And when, say, Facebook says it's giving like $15 billion, it's budgeting $15 billion to work on VR and AR, what they're basically doing is that they're investing a lot of that into research and talent. So it's to draw the best minds to come and work on the future of that. So that is how humanity advances. That is how technology advances. We already have everything that we need right now. We just need people to think about it differently. And that's it, right? So now there's that dearth of like socially conscious, projects, in Africa, because, people are a lot more concerned about what they can build for themselves, right? But that creates a new problem. If there's a lot of funding and money coming to like the tech ecosystem, and people are just building fintechs, and they're saying, oh, to bank the unbanked and all of that, of course it solves important problems. But then what it would do is that they will be incentivized to only solve problems for the people that are giving them the funding, right? Solve the kind of problems that those people want. And those people, in their own, they have to protect their own interests, right? Which is to be able to maybe exit at some point, or get some return on the capital that they're giving you, right? And the quickest way to do that is maybe building fintechs, right? And trust me, it would only continue to serve the middle class. So nobody's thinking about solving problems for poor people, right? Because they can't afford it. But we forget that the poor also represent value-conscious consumers, right? So we'll mostly just think of them as a charity case or as an afterthought and all of that. So it's really bad, like the problems, right? It's a difficult one to even understand, right? Because very few people are willing to even invest in it, in helping poor people like upskill and all of that. So for chess and slums, I think for us, we've gotten a lot of support from people, right, on social media, because we've been able to really use social media to get our stories out and to see how what we're doing should be important to you, to every single person, right? What we're building right now is important to the world, right? And we have to all play a role, a part in this. Tunde doesn't want to be the hero of the story. It's a great privilege, it's a great honor of a lifetime. It's the honor of a lifetime that I get to be the convener of the Chess and Slums project. But this is bigger than me now. And we all have to find our place in this, right? We have a couple of partners, right? But we want to have at least 1 million partners, right? Because the more we scale up, our impact, the more resources we need to be able to reach more children and, yada. So there's a place for everyone on this journey, right? Even for some people, if it's like hours of your time that you can commit to it, you can definitely reach out to us. And if there are people that that are actually doing social impact projects, not the ones that are just like doing it for the optics, or go to poor people and distribute food and take pictures and tell false tales of impact, tokenism, doing the barest minimum, right? Don't invest in people like that, in projects like that, right? Because they're just creating new problems. They're making these people dependent and handouts. But people that do meaningful work, like what you're doing now with Major's Furniture, to really, empower people and teach them this important skill that can make them independent at some point, right? That can help them become people of value, that have value to give, that can create. That is meaningful, right? And that is sustainable, right? So people should invest in more ideas like that. Let us begin to, own the narrative. Let us begin to steer the ship in the direction that we want it to, right? Let us begin to, invest more in people that build these socially impactful ideas, right? That can solve problems for the poor.
If I might just add to that as well, it's almost like you're at the beginning, I'm almost at the end of that runway. I'm seeing the negative impact in my work that not investing in these children, the problems it's inevitably going to cause, which is why we're here today. And some would say that what you're doing is playing the long game, but the long game will get you the results almost guaranteed, right? So for those who are really thinking about the future of the country, start investing in the programs, initiatives, social entrepreneurship that is tackling the problem at the root, right? So for somebody who is considering going into social entrepreneurship and is watching this and is thinking, this is fantastic.
Yes.
Like Tunde has inspired me so much. This conversation has been incredible. And they want to take the first step. What would you tell them to do to initiate their sort of journey into social entrepreneurship?
Okay, so and what you shared was very profound. I completely agree with you. And I think the first advice I'd give anyone that wants to like build something to help people, right? Read this book, Prosperity Paradox by Efosa Ejomo.
I
It's
think I
in
just downloaded. I think
Prosperity
I
Paradox.
just downloaded that.
Yes,
Incredible.
incredible book. Like I think everyone like on the journey of entrepreneurship, they need to read it. And being an entrepreneur doesn't mean you have to go and start NGO. No, you can also still build a startup, but make sure that you're socially conscious. You're actually building something that solves problems for the common man, right? So they don't become a liability to that future we're building. That's why when people like give to our project, I don't tell them that you're donating to charity, like you're investing in the future. Thank you. Tell them thank you for investing in a future that includes all of us. Because that's what we're doing. We're expanding margins, right? For people that have been marginalized. Just read that book, right? I think it should give you all the important insights that you need to understand the problems that plague us as a continent, as a people, and give you a new lens to like look at the problem. So you're not looking at it like everyone else, but through the eyes of an entrepreneur, right? As a leader, right? Africa needs leaders like that. Second thing, just start. Now, you have to be willing to live with this, with a degree of uncertainty. And I think a lot of that fear comes from not knowing what the next 2 years would look like, what the next 3 years would look like, what the outcomes, right? But, just like something you shared, some recently on your Twitter that I really, really loved was we're unable, I think Steve Jobs, shared, was one, I think he shared this, uh, a couple of years back, right? That we're unable to connect the dots in hindsight, right? We're only able to connect the dots in hindsight, rather. Like when a lot of like those things happen in that moment, we're unable to understand like what the outcomes really, really, really look like. It's only in hindsight that we can now connect the dots and be like, oh, this had to happen. Oh, now I understand why
Yes.
this happened, and it all makes sense, right? And he said he has never regretted it. Right. Of course, he has built something that has changed humanity, like changed like the fabric of like the way we live and the way we interact with the world. And that's it. So if you want to start out and you're afraid that what if it doesn't become successful? What if it's a valid concern that everyone that has ever done anything great, they've always had that concern. But that courage to be able to live with that uncertainty, right, is what matters. We have to accept it that even if this doesn't pan out the way I envisage it, that'll be okay because I'm convinced that I'm doing the right thing, right? You must always let the integrity of what you do shine through, like the way you talk about it, right? Your passion must be unwavering. Like you must have complete faith in your ideas because people will come and tell you that, no, that doesn't make sense. Imagine 5 years ago I said chess can change the world. It doesn't make sense. Or chess can change children and take them out of poverty. Chess put food on the table. No, right. But look at it now. It has snowballed. A lot of like the pockets of different things with it has now snowballed into a global revolution. Right. So that is how the world works. And finally, right, most people don't really know what they're doing. Right. You get to know it as you begin to climb up the social ladder. You see that people are just winging it, but the most important is that they show up every day.
Every single day.
Right? So you must have that courage to impress your story, your greatness on the world. Like you must believe that your own thoughts, your own, like your skills, what you do, that it matters in the grand scheme of things. Right? It's just the courage to impress that on the world that matters. Everything is just hype. People that, you know what, if you do this thing, I mean do this thing. This is this, and I have a place in the world because I built this thing. So you must always have that courage, like to continue to impress yourself, your life, your story, because it matters, right? And someday, right? If the spotlight shines on you and you get your moment, right? Very few people will get their moments. There are people that actually really did good things and they are known. They never got their chance in the limelight, right? But what they built, is important, and it solves problems, and it has advanced humanity. So you must be willing to live with that understanding that you may never get your chance in the limelight, and that's okay. But then you know that you took the road less traveled, right? And it changed the lives of so many people, even if you never got the accolades, right? And while you're building in those quiet years, right, there's this quote by Lenin that, there are weeks, there are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen, right? That happened for me. Like, first 3 years of Chess and Slums, no one cared, no one was paying attention. Maybe I had like 5 followers, but now I have maybe over 300,000 followers, and I can't walk into any place in the world. People recognize me because of what I just do through chess, an idea that I just thought about in my small room in the corridor, right? And one day, it just happened, and I got my chance in the spotlight, knowing fully well that I didn't even know what success would look like for like a chess project. Like, is it that I'll become popular or famous or what? Like, who cares about chess, right? But when I got that chance in the spotlight, right, I was ready for it. And when you get your decades in a week, it is important that in those quiet years, you're building capacity, right? You're upskilling, you're doing the best that you can, right? And you're not seeking validation in the wrong things. And when you get a chance in the limelight and you get a chance to prove your mettle, to show the world what you're truly made of, right? Then you will be ready for it. Then your life now becomes like symbolic, right? You represent hope for other people too, right? That would also start out like you. So you become that figure someday. So that is your responsibility, both to the work and to the people that will now come, after you, right? So this is how greatness works, right? From my own little experience, right? So the most important thing is to start out, as you continue to go through the motions, stay true to your convictions, and, I'll be rooting for you. God bless you. I hope this turns out well. And even if it doesn't, I hope, you find peace, and you'll be able to live with it.
Fantastic. Tunde, thank you so much. I don't think we could have ended on a better note. I really hope that you guys have gained from this conversation as much as I have. I am even more deeply inspired. I am rooting to go. And even the little work that I'm doing, I'm just finding a little bit of fire has just been ignited underneath me for me to even push a little bit harder. So whether you're already on your journey or whether or not you're just about to start, just know that the most important thing is you continue to show up and outwork your self-doubt. Guys, please, as per usual, do take care of yourself and don't forget to be extraordinary in the way that only you can be. Take care.